Guten Abend, an diesem späten Abend. Hier sitzt das Arditti Quartet, neben mir der Primarius Irvine Arditti, daneben Ashot Sarkissjan, Lukas Fels und Ralf Ehlers. Und das Quartett hat heute Nachmittag um 18 Uhr ein Konzert gegeben und dies ist die späte Fortsetzung dieses Konzerts. Es ist nicht die Fortsetzung dessen, was Sie eben im großen Saal gehört haben. Wir werden heute Abend über das Helikopterquartett von Karl-Heinz Stockhausen reden, und zwar weil Irvine Arditti neben mir zu den 4 Leuten gehörte, die dieses Quartett uraufgeführt haben im Rahmen des Holland Festivals. I think it was in 1995. Huh?
Are we going to talk about Stockhausen?
Not yet.
Oh, good. Because I would take my sweater off if we were going to.
Okay, because it's you're getting hot.
Yeah.
Okay. No, just we wait some. You can.
Perfect.
You can take the microphone whenever you want. Ich wollte noch bekannt geben, dass wir zumindest für heute Abend dieses Foyer in Arditti Foyer umbenannt oder überhaupt benannt haben. Bisher heißt es ja nur Foyer 2 und jetzt heißt es Arditti Foyer. Das ist ein offizieller Akt der Namensgebung. Ich möchte jetzt aber anfangen mit ein bisschen Film. Können wir mal die ersten, sagen wir, 2 Minuten von dem Film sehen? Das ist jetzt ein Abschnitt, in dem Karl-Heinz Stockhausen etwas darüber erzählt, was er geträumt hat.
Ich habe keine Philosophie, aber ich habe mein Leben lang geträumt, dass ich fliegen kann und fühle, wie das ist, wenn man fliegt. Und in vielen Träumen löse ich mich weg von der Erde. Es gibt einen Traum, der oft wiederkommt, dass ich in einem großen Keller bin und Leute herumstehen im Frack mit einem Glas, das sie alle haben. Und ich weiß, ich habe die Technik, dass alle auf einmal ganz still werden, weil sie mich nicht so richtig bemerken wollen. Und dann gehe ich auf die Spitzen meines Fußes und stoße mich ab und fliege und bin auf einmal mit dem Rücken an der Decke und kann dann auch mich fliegend mit der Brust über den Fußboden bewegen, wieder hochgehen. Alle sagen, oh, und dann drehe ich mich vor der Mauer in einer ganz eleganten Kurve. Und der Traum kommt auch wieder, dass alle völlig sprachlos werden, weil ich fliegen kann, als Mensch. Oder dass ich von hohen Bergen aus fliege. Nun, das kennt man ja, aber das hat sich in meiner Musik von Anfang bis heute gezeigt. Wenn ich im Studio bin, mache ich die Augen zu und habe also Regler unter der Hand und ein Klanggebilde, das vorher da ist. Dann bewege ich das in den Lautsprechern wie ein Vogel, der fliegt. Also das ist keine Philosophie, sondern das ist ein Urtraum, dass Musik fliegt, weil ich fliege.
Do you remember this speech of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen? And
No.
you don't. But you had these subtitles, and you know that he was talking about his dream of flying. Is it music about flying? What you played there?
It's about music supposedly in space, in the space around the public, around the concert hall, around. For me, this was all a little bit of a problem because they don't understand English. This was a little bit of a problem because in the concert hall, the music wasn't flying. Mm-hmm. The music was static. We were positioned like a string quartet with monitors. And so although we were flying, the music was not moving around the concert space. And I did mention this to Karl-Heinz, but he was so intrigued, obviously, with this incredible idea of writing a string quartet in helicopters, that maybe this would have been another level which he might have been able to go to at a later stage.
So Stockhausen didn't think about the musicians who had to play his music. He was thinking about himself, his ideas, his dreams, and the public in the venue.
I think every true genius thinks about himself and his ideas. He doesn't think about musicians on that level. I mean, he thought about us, of course, but he was primarily concerned with what he was doing, of course.
And did you feel this also during the rehearsals? Because the rehearsals were without helicopters, just in studios, in a room, in a common room, and then later in separated rooms.
The rehearsals were an intense musical experience. He relearned his score in order to be able to rehearse with us, which means he wrote the piece, and then he began to write other pieces. And when it was possible to realize this piece, because it wasn't done as initially planned in Salzburg, there were problems. So eventually it was done about 1 year later in Amsterdam. But when we came to rehearse with Stockhausen in The Hague, we had 3 days of intensive rehearsal with him, and he was fairly incredible. He knew the piece inside out, and we had wonderful days rehearsing the music of the piece without the helicopters.
I think the problem for the premiere in Salzburg, which was planned for 1994, was that the Austrian Green Party objected to all the pollution because of music. And I think the Dutch didn't have this kind of problem, huh?
No, the Dutch didn't have this kind of problem. I mean, of course, in Amsterdam there was a lot of pollution coming from the cafes, and so a few helicopters flying around didn't make very much difference.
But you had another problem in Amsterdam with the rehearsal, didn't you? What was the story with the rehearsal? You couldn't rehearse because the people sat outside in their gardens and they didn't like the noise.
You know, in Holland, perhaps like in Frankfurt, but less like in Frankfurt, they're not blessed with good weather. I mean, neither are we in England, but we like to think we are because we're directly connected with the Gulf Stream. But maybe they have 2 weeks of sunshine in Amsterdam. And unfortunately, the dress rehearsal day fell on one of those especially sunshine days. And Stockhausen insisted that we had several hours rehearsal on the ground, testing everything. And then he planned 2 rehearsals in the air with tests in between, because it was very complicated to know if everything was going to work. I mean, I think quite rightly he made this intensive rehearsal plan. But unfortunately, all the Dutch people that day were not in the cafes smoking dope. They were sitting in their gardens. And some were quite near the Westergasfabrik where we played the piece. And I think they got about 2,000 complaints. And the director of the Holland Festival contacted Stockhausen and said, if you don't stop the rehearsals on the ground, then we'll cancel the performance tomorrow. So we had to curtail the rehearsals, and we had 1 dress rehearsal only in the air. But it all worked okay in the end.
I prepared another piece of the film in which we can see and hear that Stockhausen knows very, very exactly what he wants. It is no game with helicopters. It's very serious and exactly planned music. Können wir mal den nächsten Abschnitt sehen?
Just 42, please. Graham, please be so kind and separate the fourth beat with a G from the previous E flat glissando. We do only Graham's.
Are you saying something? Oh. Because we don't hear you.
Excuse me.
Oh, I don't hear you anyway.
Irvine, could you stop for a moment, Irvine?
I look very young then.
Graham is playing alone. Okay. Here, much better rhythmically, but the C is too low. When you get that C is too low.
The C natural.
Yep. Okay, we come now to the part of Garth. Please, Garth, the 12 still is not audible. Could you say it just once now and play the same D without click track?
Yes. 12.
No, I don't hear the instrument at all.
Okay. 12.
Still, the instrument is much too soft.
Okay.
12. Very good. Excellent. And do the 9 again.
9.
You see, after the accent, the instrument becomes too soft because you're so concentrating on your voice. Do it again.
9.
Okay. That was a good idea.
Yeah.
You made a crescendo at the end of the instrument. Do that. I write it in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now you want to Graham, please.
Beginning of the bar?
No. Just where the sieben is, without click track.
I see.
Go.
7.
Yeah. So what you do is what Garth suggested before. When you have such a name of a number, make a little crescendo of the instrument towards the next note every time. Every time. 7.
7. 7. 13.
No, the N is not long enough. 13. Say 13 and push the N so that it comes through. Okay. So you get the click track now for 43, please.
43 or 43?
Yes, we go 43. Thank you. It was excellent. Then please, Irvine. Irvine, could you verify 25, the triplets?
Yeah, it's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No, I've done it wrong again.
That's it.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Right.
Perfect?
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just make, if you can, wow, make the accents a bit sharper. No. Irvine, now you're making accelerando again. Bow. That's it.
He really knows what he wants. And that's a very important thing for us because it focuses the learning process. And if we're swimming in a world where it's not clear what the composer wants, it becomes an entirely different experience for us. But this is the sort of piece where you need to know what the composer wants.
Okay, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen knows what he wants. How do you know what he wanted without being able to rehearse with him? Because you also performed this piece 2 times without Stockhausen.
Well, I was just looking at this little scene, and I find it absolutely amazing that he's sat in an empty room. I mean, there is no one else but him, because like all the players are in separate rooms, and he's actually like clapping the beat to Irvine, who is like probably like, across the building, like just to himself, like, and this is like the whole idea of the piece of making 4 people play extremely complex chamber music, or something like all these, like there's like accents that he wanted like precisely together, and the speed of the tremolo has to be like kind of precisely matched between the instruments, and also matched precisely with the speed of the rotos.
I think I have to explain something which perhaps is not completely understood, but in the performance, in the rehearsals, in the recording, we could not hear each other. So we played with a click on a tape. And every bar was a different tempo. So each bar changed tempo. And we had headphones to listen to this, and headphones to hear our own sound in the helicopter, because the sound of the helicopter was so loud inside. You had to put headphones on to not listen to the helicopter. So one ear was the click, the metronome, the tempo of the piece, and the other ear was listening to what you were doing. And it was not possible to hear the other players. As Ashot was saying, we're in another environment. We're not connected to each other. And this is not really a piece of chamber music. Chamber music is about communication.
But it's written. It's written as a piece of chamber music.
It's written as a piece of chamber music.
Isn't it just an utopic way of chamber music?
It's über chamber music.
It's Stockhausen's utopia of playing together. It's his idea of.
Well, it's chamber music without a roof.
I think he had the concept before he then realized how he was going to realize, sorry to use the same word twice, but how he was going to have the piece realized, actually played. He said he had the concept of the dream. I mean, people must know that I persecuted him for many years to write us a string quartet that we could play everywhere in the world, in every concert hall, even the Alte Opera.
And that's what you got.
And that's not what I got. I got a piece which couldn't be played anywhere unless we could find a helicopter team and a television team. And so this is quite an extraordinary realization of a piece that I wanted to add, of course, to our collection of the composers that I was most interested in and wanted quartets from our history. And Stockhausen disappointed me, and he didn't disappoint me, all in the same, because he conceived something quite extraordinary. Genius. Unfortunately, madness is very close to genius, and sometimes it's difficult to determine the borderline here. And by that I mean whether the piece could really possibly work. But he found a way to make the piece realizable. And I think it's up to the listener to decide if the piece really worked. But it's genius and madness altogether. It's just about what I wanted, people to create things that were beyond the edge, beyond the limits.
But I think this little difference between genius and madness is one of the reasons why people laugh when he's talking about his dreams and flying and things like that. Because you never know, is it still genius or is it already mad, or is it both of it?
It's something in between. Mm-hmm. And this is what's interesting.
This is well incredibly naive, no?
Yeah, it's naive as well as being genius.
No, but
it's all mixed together.
He was incredibly naive.
Naive is mixed with the madness and trying to achieve something. Mm.
Yeah, but it's not only madness, because he has to organize a really big bunch of technique, of money, of helicopters and things like that.
Well, he never organized that.
He never organized
He said
it.
to me, he wrote the piece, he never told me it had helicopters in it. He said, I'm going to write your string quartet. And he said, if the festival that produces it has a good team, then they will be able to realize it. And this was the madness. Because he said, if people know what it's about now, they won't do it. that was the genius. To understand not to tell people. And I remember I was in the south of Germany recording at the time, and somebody sent me a fax, the agent, with the front page of the score, required for performance, 4 helicopters, 4 television units, and in small print, string quartet.
Well, he really disappointed you at that time, didn't he?
No, at that time I thought, oh my God, we're not going to be able to do this, you know, because at that point helicopters were not really integrated into the quartet repertoire.
Today, we talked about it some minutes ago. Today it might be not very easy to find in Germany enough helicopters to perform this piece of music. But that's not so important. I just wanted to continue this subject, playing Stockhausen today without him, without being able to rehearse with him. But you have this click track. This click track is part of the score, and it's still the same. The score is the same. The click track is the same. Is the music also the same?
Yes, the music is the same. Stockhausen, actually, in his score, he wrote very, very exact instructions for everyone on how to play everything.
Like 30 pages of instructions.
Exactly. And of course, I mean, you know, Irvine worked with Stockhausen, so he can tell us actually what he wanted, which is kind of quite crucial as well. But I mean, the way Stockhausen wrote his music is very, very exact. And actually, if you just read the score very carefully, you would have a very good idea of what he wanted in his performance. We've done the piece twice in this combination, both times in Italy. And the piece is really a little bit utopic because, well, first of all, is this idea of playing together, which is actually a wonderful idea. You've got a click track, and you've got kind of accents going one, tung, 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 like this. And they've got to be in this order. And we're also saying those numbers that you heard on the thing. And the only way the audience can notice that we are not together if it's 1, 3, 2, 4. And sometimes they're in very close succession. So it's really very, very difficult to play it really together. But it's a challenge that it's really a wonderful idea, kind of this idea of playing, you know, the chamber music being connected in the air, even though we are completely separate from one another.
There is also like the visual aspect of the performance, because each player is seen on a separate screen in the hall. And he gives very precise visual instructions as well. Like if there is a rest, you have to like freeze in the exact position where you stop playing, and then restart exactly there again. If you see it in the hall on the screens, it's quite amazing because the cameras have to be angled exactly in the same way on the player. So you have like this four very similar images that like all are playing very fast, and then suddenly one will freeze, and then continue exactly from the same place, while on a like on the other part of the screen, someone else is freezing, and that is also precisely timed. It looks almost like an animation. It's quite stunning if it's well realized.
Lucas, some minutes ago you said that there's something naive behind this thinking music, planning music. What do you mean with that?
No, I mean naive is as well the way how he's talking about it. I mean this, but not naive, not in a negative sense. I mean it's great, but it is so
kind of innocence, isn't it?
Innocent, yeah, like a child. I mean it's just and. I mean, as well, it's a utopic and great idea. It's as well a very naive idea to have a string quartet playing together in 4 different helicopters, not hearing each other. I mean, you can imagine your colleagues and you can imagine how they play and everything, and then it will.
Is it naive or is it genius? Because he's not thinking about how; he's just thinking about what he wants. And the true genius doesn't worry about how to do it. he lets other people solve that problem.
No,
I mean,
in a way,
I
yeah,
agree
it's
with you.
right,
There are
yeah.
lots of things that are naive about it, but if you're involved in this, as I was for many years, trying to encourage him to write the piece, he actually wrote the piece, and it wasn't the piece that I wanted at all. But then you have to go along with the idea, like
it's
like
great.
we go
Yeah,
along
yeah.
with every composer that writes good, not so good, or bad pieces. We go along with them. We play their script. We try to make their pieces sound better than they are. With Stockhausen, that wasn't the problem. The problem was actually how to realize his ideas as best as possible and how to make it happen. And this was quite a responsibility.
Perhaps we could now have a new look at the film. There is a part of rehearsal in helicopters. They are quite old helicopters. I don't think they are still able to fly because it's the Grasshoppers crew from the world premiere in 1995. Können wir mal?
And this is genius. This is making the helicopters sound like wasps. This is the filmmaker, not Stockhausen.
Somewhere in the film he's talking about bees because he loves bees. Yeah?
Und dann eines Tages passiert Folgendes. Ich arbeitete jeden Tag im Studio für elektronische Musik des Westdeutschen Rundfunks in Köln. Und dieses Studio hat etwa 10 Meter lang zur Ostseite, wo der Rhein auf etwa 150 Meter vom Studio entfernt vorbeifließt. Und davor sind so Hafengebäude, große Fenster, 10 Meter lange Fenster. Und auf einmal sagt die Katinka Paswer, die mit mir im Studio war und zusammen Steven und 2 Techniker, sagte, guck mal da! Und auf der linken Seite kommt in das Fenster auf einmal ein grüner Helikopter rein. Und hinter dem ein zweiter Helikopter und ein dritter Helikopter und ein vierter. Und dann flogen vollkommen in Serie diese 4 Helikopter durch diese 10 Meter Fenster über dem Rhein und rechts wieder raus. Da habe ich gesagt, also das ist ein Himmelszeichen. Das erklärt mir niemand auf der Welt. Und die 2 sind in Jauchzer ausgebrochen und haben gesagt, guck mal, das ist ja unglaublich, 4 ausgerechnet und so. Na gut, dann war das wieder so eine ganz überrationale, oder wie soll ich das sagen, nicht irrationale, aber supramentale Bestätigung dafür, dass irgendwas im Gange ist, was wir ja bis heute nicht genau erklären können, wieso man nun gerade so etwas macht. Ich habe diese Nacht, die halbe Nacht wach gelegen und gedacht, was gäbe es denn überhaupt für andere Möglichkeiten, wenn ich mir sowas ausdenken wollte? Und die verrücktesten Situationen gesehen. Ich liebe zum Beispiel seit Kind Bienen. Und mein Onkel hatte sehr viele Bienenstöcke. Und dieses Summen von ganz vielen Bienen zusammen ist für mich ein magischer Klang. Vor allen Dingen, der ist nie konstant. Und ich sah also einen Musiker in einem großen Drahtkorb sitzen. Und dann ging es darum, ja, aber der kann nicht bei Bienen sitzen, denn dann stechen die Hände und so. Kann er nicht spielen. Und dann hatte ein Techniker in meinem Traum diese Nacht, hatte so ein Spray. Und dann hat er die Hände gesprayt und dann gingen die Bienen nicht mehr an die Hände. Dann konnte er ohne weiteres spielen. Etc. Solche Nachträume habe ich jetzt wegen des Helikopterquartetts, was wir heute probieren werden.
Arditti Quartet was lucky that he didn't compose a beat piece.
Immer mehr träume ich jetzt von Möglichkeiten in meiner Musik Klangereignisse hineinzubringen, die man überhaupt nicht bekommt, weder durch die Instrumental- oder Vokalmusik noch durch die elektronische Musik.
Oké, als we dit kunnen draaien.
Vier, 5, 9, 12. 12, toll. 12, 15, 12, 9 sind die Quersummen der Zahlen. Das ist 390, 465, 453 und 324. Das ist, und wenn man die Quersumme nimmt, dann hat man also 12, 15, 12, 9. Das ist wunderbar. 4 zu 5 zu 4 zu 3. Morgen Bart.
Guten Morgen, Stockhausen.
Wie geht's?
Sehr gut.
Das finde ich
Danke.
toll. Sieht wunderbar aus. The musicians play these tremolos. You will hear that now. They play like the rotor blades. Etc. They go up and down in speed and in pitch. And it will blend completely with the rotor blade sound. So when the rotor blades change, for example, directions, as you know, then they turn around, etc., then the sound changes. And when sometimes you stay on the spot, I know it makes a drastic change. So if sometimes you stay for a moment still, then the sound is wonderful.
Wil je dat breken of hou je het voor en piep je eraf? Ben je blij? Ja. Marco.
How often did you perform this piece?
Well, there were the 3 initial performances in Amsterdam. We did it 3 times in one day. And then we played it in Rome, in the Parc de la Musica, and then in the Venice Biennale 2 years ago. So on 3 separate occasions, but actually 5 performances.
And the last 2 in Italy?
Yeah.
With these guys here? Hmm?
Yeah, these guys here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think so, but I don't really know because I was in a different helicopter.
And you couldn't see them, huh? So.
No.
Yeah, we couldn't turn pages for each other either.
And you were also in the helicopter, you can promise that.
There are photos, yeah.
But it's very interesting, this piece, that it carries on. You might think that a piece like this would not survive after Stockhausen was here no more to supervise performances. But people seem fascinated to play this piece. And I feel a responsibility for having been the person who not persuaded him, but forced him to write something for string quartet. And I consider it a great achievement that he actually came up with something. When he says on the film, I fulfilled my commitment.
You really did.
It was really like a number of years, 12 or more years, that I asked him if he would write a piece. And he said, no, I don't write string quartets. I don't write concerti. I don't write symphonies. No way. And I kept asking him because I was really interested in his music. I kept asking festivals to ask him, people who could commission him, like the Festival d'Automne in Paris for many years. They were asking him if he would write the piece, and then later Salzburg. He just needed a lot of leverage to get him to entertain such an idea. And I think writing a string quartet was not his thing at all. He never wrote for string instruments. And I think in a way he was afraid to write for string instruments. So he had to hide behind the idea, but not hide behind the idea. It's always a contradiction with him. Genius, madness, hide behind the idea, but turn the idea into something that he could feel comfortable with.
And I think, what he was able to feel comfortable in was what Lucas called utopia, something that was not in the music, not in a venue, not in a concert hall, but outside of that.
I don't know about his private utopia.
Lucas, what did you mean by? Could we name what is utopic in this music?
I mean, the realization, what he really wants. I mean, all the precision that Ashot talked about it already. I mean, it is utopic to realize it in that situation, because I mean, in the situation, I mean, it's not very comfortable in a helicopter. It's not the usual place you play or practice, and it is. You try to really to play as precise and with your click track as you can, but it's something. It's lots of other things are suddenly more sort of in the foreground or more important, and it's a challenge. I mean, it's a completely different challenge. It's a completely unusual situation. It's a totally.
Maybe what we can say is that he was not very practically orientated, because what he demands of his musicians is, I mean, it's an incredible amount of time and commitment, which is very difficult to have in these days. And maybe that is a little bit utopic, but it is a wonderful way of to have this commitment for his music and to demand this commitment of the musicians. As you saw in the film, you know, they rehearse for days, kind of in different rooms, and it's, you know, to be able to give that time and that commitment, that maybe is a little bit utopic, but it's in a very beautiful way, actually.
But what is the genius is that other people could have had this idea, other more liberal composers, artists, and it would be a concept. But Stockhausen realized that concept. He made everything work by the precision of his score and also working with him afterwards. In fact, it was my idea to change the speed of the tremolos in order to not have everything rather monotonous. And he liked this idea. He then started saying, that's great because it could combine with the rotor blades of the helicopters. And then he was lecturing the pilots, as you saw, as not to fly straight, but to keep changing directions. And we were quite happy if the pilots flew straight, because we had a music and a music stand, and we didn't want the helicopters. It was a lovely day in Amsterdam, the first day, but if it would have been turbulent, it would have been much more difficult to realize the thing. What I'm trying to say is he went into this in greatest of detail. His mind was incredible that he thought out all these things. And when things were missing, he added them in the rehearsal. As I said, with the tremolo, with all sorts of details. You see him in the film taking pictures for the score of exactly, there are many illustrations in the score and exactly how he wanted everything to happen. This is maybe a good thing and a bad thing. He gave that doctrine, according to Karl-Heinz, about how you had to do things. And maybe other people could achieve those things in another way. But he went through everything in such fine detail. This is what distinguished him from other composers who might have created something like this.
The score is about 100 pages thick, I think, and only like 25, 30 pages of that are the actual music. The rest is just pages and pages of extremely precise instructions for the performers, for the technicians, for the pilots, for the hall, for the television crew, for the mixing in the studio, all that in 2 languages. And then there are, like, I think 10 pages of photographs, like to the minutest technical detail of how it was done in the performance.
But I mean, just seeing him again, I mean, this film, I mean, of course I've seen it before, but that's something you can really learn, I think, from it, or somehow see from it, there's so many things, there's so much technical stuff. I mean, it's crazy, more than any other string quartet ever written. But when he rehearses and when he works on the piece, it's only about music. It's only he talks only about the music and how the expression of the music and the crescendo and the together of the music and everything. And that I find is absolutely fantastic. That's really genius. I mean, this is really the real Stockhausen. It's in the end, there's lots of things happening, but in the end, it's a piece of music. It's not a crazy idea.
Yeah, but it's like he was rehearsing a multimedia thing. We had 3 intensive days where he rehearsed the music, and he knew the score inside out, and we rehearsed for hours and hours, and it was great working with him because he was an extraordinary musician. But that was just one layer of the piece, perhaps the most important layer, but then the piece was about lots of other things which had to be added later. And then he had to rely on us to do what we'd done in the rehearsals. But rarely, we always rehearsed in separate rooms. We were always conditioned, if you like. I don't like using that word, but conditioned to rehearse the piece as we were going to play it. When we did all the rehearsals, we were in separate rooms. He was in a 5th room. He recorded everything. We went to listen to see how we'd done. When we did the performances, we were in separate helicopters. Again, we could only experience afterwards what we'd done. When we made the recording in the school in Kurten where he lived, again, we were in separate rooms. And so we still couldn't hear each other, even for the studio recording, which we did without helicopter sounds, which were mixed on later. And it's incredibly difficult to play really precisely together if you not only can't hear, but you can't see your colleagues.
And the click track doesn't help.
Well, it does help. It makes the whole thing possible. But if you can imagine a click track going click, 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 clook, clook. And then at the last one, you have to play triplets over the first 2 beats. It means you have to know exactly what the new tempo is going to be. You can almost condition yourself to learn this on the ground in a rehearsal studio. But when you're in the helicopter and the signal is not so good for the click, and the helicopter is making quite a lot of noise, and the sun is shining over Amsterdam, and it's cafes, then it's another experience.
We have another part of the film where Stockhausen talks about what musicians have learned during the rehearsals.
Lernen, das war die Hauptsache des Studiums, wie die 3 Formeln oder die 3 Melodien von jedem Musiker vorzubereiten und noch hinterher zu hören sind, sodass sie das ganze polyphone Geflecht erstmal verstehen mussten. Und das hat ziemlich lange gebraucht. Jetzt sind sie so weit, dass sie genau wissen, wer die Fortsetzung spielen wird, und entsprechend machen sie Crescendi, machen sie kleine Accelerandi von den Tremoli. Die Tremoli sind also unheimlich differenziert worden. Am Anfang waren sie alle gleich, und jetzt geht es der zweite mit Accelerandi pro Ton. ich muss mich anpassen an die Tatsache, dass ständig die Klangfarben und die Rhythmen der Rotorblätter mit den Instrumenten gemischt sind. Und ich habe heute einiges gelernt, was ich nicht vorgesehen hatte, dass man eben von Zeit zu Zeit, und zwar improvisierend, die 4 Signale der Rotorblätter mal aufziehen kann, ohne die Musik zu verunklaren. Und das klingt wunderbar, wenn also in den 4 Lautsprechersäulen wie Wellen die Rhythmen der Rotorblätter hervorkommen und wieder in den Hintergrund zurückgehen, sodass sie also auch selbstständig werden und man buchstäblich Fluchtbewegungen hören kann.
Und wie ist also das Resultat jetzt im Vergleich mit dem Wunsch, mit dem Traum?
Oh, das ist eine schwere Frage. Es ist einfach alles sehr irdisch jetzt wieder. Man erkennt die Monitore und ich bin völlig befasst mit dem Mischpult und mit den Reglern und mit Mikrofonen und das nimmt auf einmal wieder die Hauptbedeutung. Also ich kann gar nicht so frei sein wie im Traum, wo ich in der Luft schwebte. Also ich selber hatte gar keinen Körper und sogar durch die Helikopter sehen konnte. Das ist ja ganz merkwürdig, dass man im Traum Objekte nicht immer als Widerstände erkennt, sondern man kann durch sie hindurchschauen. Und ich konnte gleichzeitig auf die Erde schauen und viele Menschen, winzig klein in großen Mengen stehen und hören, sehen. Das ist natürlich alles weg. Also jetzt bin ich wirklich wieder in einem Saal mit schwarzen Vorhängen und 4 Säulen von Fernsehschirmen und wie gesagt den ganzen technischen Apparatismus, der das Projekt möglich macht. Man kann mich nicht darauf festlegen, jetzt was zu sagen, was die Fantasie betrifft und die Umsetzung der Fantasie in Technik. Die Technik wird dann wirklich wieder die Hauptsache.
Okay, so Stockhausen is talking about his about utopia. He wanted his music to leave not only the concert hall, but well, also the audience and this planet. And he once in his film he talks also about possible performances in other kinds of flying machines. So I think Stockhausen sometimes thought of outer space as a stage for his music.
Quartet number 2.
No, I think Stockhausen was always fascinated with space. I mean, from Gruppen for 3 orchestras, music moving around from electronic music, from telemusic, done in Osaka first, with hundreds or lots of loudspeakers all over an auditorium, and then Carré for 4 orchestras. He was, and all the electronic pieces that came later as part of Licht. He was always fascinated by movement in space. In fact, he said to me that he was doing the most important thing since polyphony, since early polyphony, was experimenting with space. We came through classical music, and now he was creating music in space. I mean, for me, this concept disappointed me because the people in the concert hall could not hear the trajectory of the helicopters. For me, it would have been more fascinating if we would have had 100 speakers in the hall and television monitors for where we should be, but the sounds were being moved around the hall of the 4 players, like we were moving around the sky in relation to the concert hall, because we're flying around the concert hall. And it has to be quite a small radius, because otherwise the signal is lost. But we're flying around all the time in different trajectories. And I think it wasn't possible to realize something like this in the beginning, and then he didn't have a chance to do it again in his lifetime. But he was always fascinated with the movement of music in space, and I think this is, of course, what influenced this idea, and this is what made him able to fulfill my request to write a string quartet. I mean, he never really wrote a string quartet, but he did. And for me, that's also the connection between genius and insanity, how anyone could believe they could write a string quartet with helicopters and have it played. But it wasn't a gimmick. It was totally and utterly serious. I know that because I spoke to him on many occasions before he wrote the score, when he was writing the score, after he wrote the score. I remember sitting with him having a meal after the 3 performances in Amsterdam. We were all completely exhausted because it's actually very tiring doing something like this. And he said it was really wonderful, and he thanked us for being able to do this. And he said that this was a kind of a dream realized and something that was on the edge. I mean, he said it could be done, but I think in himself, he wasn't really convinced whether the thing could really happen. And, you know, we went to airfields in Holland. I went first alone with my violin in a lone helicopter, and a signal, not the television, just the sound, and on the ground to see if they could pick up the sound, to see if they could pick up a real signal from the helicopter. So there was an enormous amount of technical know-how and rehearsal and thought that went into doing the whole thing. I think in the beginning he had no idea whether the signals would be able to be passed into the concert hall, if this was going to be possible.
So also learning about all these things is very important for rehearsing and realizing this music. Learning new technical things, new ways to play your instrument.
I'm not sure we learned any new ways to play our instrument. I think actually the knowledge of the Arditti Quartet helped Stockhausen in the rehearsals over the distance between him and string instruments. But we certainly learned from him what he wanted in this piece, and we worked very hard to achieve exactly what he wanted. We even encouraged him to go further with his imagination for what would be possible, which is what we try to do with many composers. But it's what it is. And there is a very good piece lurking underneath those helicopter sounds. I say that as a catalyst and encouragement for people to understand that we heard the piece without the helicopter sounds. And you can hear that a little bit on part of this recording, when the helicopter sounds aren't quite so loud.
I think this might be a very good end after some more than 1 hour talking about and with and a bit to Stockhausen. He's listening, I think. And if you want, wenn Sie möchten, we can have a look at the last 5 minutes of this film, who is about the premiere, the world premiere of this great helicopter quartet with Irvine, Arditti, and, well, it's not the same guys. It's Graham Jennings, Garth Knox, and Rohan de Saram. Okay, and bevor wir jetzt mit dem Film anfangen, wollte ich mich noch von Ihnen verabschieden, Ihnen fürs Zuhören danken. And I want to thank this great quartet for talking with me and to you. Vielen Dank, and see you next time.
In vielen Kunstdialekten gesungen wird und die Sänger haben noch nie diese Silben artikuliert. Das ist eine vollkommen neue Sprache, die ich entwickelt habe für dieses Stück. Also das wird wohl für mein ganzes Leben immer weiter so gehen, dass ich für jeden neuen Anfang etwas erwarte von mir selber und von den Mitteln, die ich verwende, was ich noch nie gehört habe und was ungespielt und unerhört ist. Dass durch Musik mein Geist sich immer weiter entwickelt in der Entdeckung und Erfindung von geistigen Formen und in einer ständigen Erweiterung der Akustik, meines akustischen Raumes und meiner Fähigkeit zu hören. Dass ich immer mehr Zusammenhänge erkennen kann und immer mehr Schichten, Beziehungen wirklich wahrnehmen kann durch meine Ohren. Und die Augen helfen auf den Ohren. Also das ist das Ziel, das kein Ende hat. Ich würde sehr gerne einen Körper haben, der noch viel mehr kann als der Körper, den ich jetzt habe. Und da geht meine Hoffnung hin, dass ich eines Tages einen geistigen Körper bekomme, der viel wahrnehmungsfähiger ist als der Körper, den ich jetzt habe mit meinen menschlichen Sinnen.